Good evening, everyone. My name is Soumya Mehta, and I welcome you back to the fourth and final workshop of the How to Web 3.0 event by Geek for Geeks VIT Bhopal, where conversations with distinguished personalities focused on Web 3.0 terms filled our weekend. In the past three sessions, we learned about crypto, Metaverse, and NFTs. Now that we know what exactly it meant, Metaverse, and the basics surrounding it, let's get into the crux of the topic. Basically, Metaverse architecture. The whole world is witnessing a major shift from the real to the digital one because of the pandemic. Not just that, COVID-19 has changed our work culture too and transformed how businesses operate. Keeping in mind all of this, it does make us wonder if for architects now, the metaverse is an untouched territory full of possibilities and an utopia without the constraints of the physical world. To tell us more about this, I would love to introduce Mr. Quittman Farmer. He is an artist, designer, and a small business owner in Chicago. He also works in animation, video games, and app development, such as augmented reality, metaverse, and NFT development. He is now the founder of Qued Animations and works with several companies to develop architecture for the metaverse. We are thrilled to have you here with us, sir.
Good morning. How's it going?
Fine, how are you?
Pretty well. Not bad at all. Thank you for the introduction. Again, my name is Quittman Farmer. I'm lead metaverse architect for Qt Animations and our partners. I'd like to thank uh, DBW Management, our management company. We're hosted out of their office here in Northbrook. So I guess with that, I'll get started. So Uh, my session is how to build a metaverse. And so I wanted to come up with something that would be universal, which is music, right? Uh, every culture has it and every culture enjoys it. So we wanted to create something fun today and give a, a brief overview of how that will be created. So before I get started, I want to just give a quick showcase of what we'll be building. See how far we get in the time slot that we get. But this is a very detailed system that is actually animated and ready for production inside of the metaverse. And so what we have here is a very cool breakdown of all of the parts. And so with that said, we'll get started. And we see here uh, the open stage. And so what I typically do whenever approach with a project is I'll start with basic shapes, basic geometry that will give me the building blocks to something more complicated. And so you see here we have cylinder, and naming conventions are always important for what we do because I never know who will be touching this after me, who will have their hands on it. So what I like to do is first and foremost, name everything that we're working on, even the screws, because it could be 15, 30, 60,000 pieces of geometry in here. And if someone is looking for something and they need to modify it, well, if I don't have a proper naming convention, then there is an issue. And so, real quick, I'm working fast because, this typically takes a few hours to build and create something really clean and cohesive. And so I'll be working really fast to create as much of this as possible in the time frame so that we have it. And so here we have part of the drum. That we're creating. And so what we'll do is we'll take all of these components once they're completed and we'll place these inside of an engine that will be able to utilize it again for like games, the metaverse, what have you. right now what I just did was combine pieces that made sense to be together. And this would be our hide. It would be the skin component that will go on top of this guy. And right now, all I'm doing is taking these components and creating a complicated system from a basic shape. While texturing. And again, this is a repetitive part of what we're building, but this is an important part when it comes to creating more complex systems, not just, buildings and uh, assets such as hard surface modeling, but the same, these are the building blocks that we will use to creating avatars as well. And so all I'm doing is picking materials that I know have certain attributes. For example, this phone would have more shinier components to create metal. And just naming it. And so you'll see me go off screen because I'm picking the color, and this software will allow me to pick the color that's closest anywhere on any of my screens. And so right now I'm running 3 screens, so it gives me a little more flexibility to play with how I want things to look. So here, we'll go here and soften the edge so it's more drum-esque. Delete the history because we don't want to keep all of that and have it bogging us down. And so this is what we'll do to build out whatever it is that we're creating. Right now, again, we're creating a drum, but any piece that we're going to create, any assets that we'll make, will have this kind of fundamental breakdown to it. So what I did was I actually made a copy, a duplicate of this guy, put at the bottom here, and I've scaled it to -1 to create the outside component. And I'll take all of these and again clean it up, little housekeeping, freeze the transformations, delete the history. And here, because I created a new component based off here, I'll take all of these and drag back into my drum. Freeze. So that's drum 1. But as you can see from our reference, there are several that we don't need to recreate. We'll just duplicate it and create the size component and all the hardware that's around it. So what I usually would do is go back here, create a cube, So I can duplicate this piece, modify, center the pivot, and I will actually take this piece, bring it down. So what we have here is the extra component to create our base. Name it. And again, all of these are basic shapes, but we can create more complicated shapes based off of adding more divisions, subdividing, and extruding. So now, what was a basic square no longer have.
Um, we had questions
Sure,
of what softwares do you use for creating your assets and how basically did you start your journey as a meta architect? Like to
sure.
students who don't know anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So this software is Maya, and I actually got exposure to. So I always knew I was going to be in some kind of creative field as a child, and so I would draw all the time. And so when I got to high school, I was too advanced for the art classes that uh, initially I was assigned to. So I go to my instructors and ask, is it possible for them to give me more advanced lessons? And naturally, I was told no. However, I can audition for a certain class that was available, and it was in 3D animation. So I'm like, oh, I didn't even know we had that. And so I auditioned and I got in, but I was a little bit behind. I was maybe like maybe 3 months behind everyone else, and I had to on my lunch breaks. So I didn't take lunch in high school. I'll go straight to the class so that I can catch up with everyone. And before long, I was learning these complex systems based off of the instructors for like a half hour to catch up. And so it really stuck with me. So once I left high school, I actually didn't go straight to college. I went into working. My dad gave me a job in construction, so actual construction. And so that gave me a lot of advantage when I did actually go to college and we start building these things. And I knew the measurements. I knew how to take, a basic geometry and morph it into something more complex. It gave me a little bit more edge, matched with the fact that for a hobby and for work, I used to woodwork. So all of these components start to make a major play when it came to creating for video games, for animation, for architecture. I've had that exposure throughout the years, so it gave me a better understanding when it came down to creating things that had nothing related to, for example, what I was doing at the time. So that's how I got my exposure. But I encourage everyone to look at any skill set that they have as an advantage towards what they want to do, and how can you transfer those skill sets when it comes down to creating.
And what according to you that people can build in the metaverse that they couldn't build on the internet as such? What is the speciality that you could build using the metaverse?
I, I think it's only limited to your imagination, really. It's only limited to your imagination. I say that because we've created so many systems and so many projects related to healthcare, to anything in medical, anything in automotives, uh, design, displays. There's no limit to what you can create and how you can use those these practical environments to create and fulfill inside the metaverse. So, for example, I'm a metaverse architect, but I create avatars as well, or NFTs that have nothing to do with basic structures. We've created things like pets, digital pets that are photorealistic and behave like actual animals. So to have that kind of exposure, it's only limited to what you're willing to put in the time and the effort to create, I think.
But with new technology, obviously the older ones go away. So, what, in your opinion, what technologies will the metaverse render obsolete in the future?
Honestly, I think that's not the way to look at it. I honestly believe that the metaverse is an extension of our environment or our world. So it works hand in hand. I think I know from basic from what we're building, my team and I and our partners, it's not something that's going to render anything obsolete. It's more so to give an extension to what is already there. That's how we're looking at the metaverse, and that's what we're building for it. For example, in the travel industry, you know, uh, how many people the average person have the time or the finances to travel, across the world? Well, given the metaverse and given, we can use photogrammetry and all of these special tools to create, a photorealistic or digital twin of a country or a world or a planet or anything. You have that ability to put on a headset, for example, or use your computer or your cell phone and be projected. For example, I'm in Chicago now. What if I want to go to Paris, but I don't have the time? I don't have the finance set aside. You know what I mean? But someone has created this, and we're creating those worlds. We're creating, the wonders esque. You know what I mean? So that it gives users the ability to uh, go outside of their environment and be transported to places that they wouldn't normally have access to. And I think that's what we're looking at it as, is a tool that will help all and connect everyone. That's what we want to do. We want to connect people. We don't want to divide it, and we certainly don't want to render anything that should be useful obsolete.
Talking about bringing metaverse into daily life, how soon do you see the AR incorporated classroom using the tech of Web 3.0 make way into our daily lives?
Honestly, I think that is very opinionated. That's something, we're looking at building platforms so that it can connect, because one-offs are great. They have their place, but the problem is when you have a one-off system, my system cannot talk to yours, for example. But if you have a platform that everyone has the ability to utilize, then your one-off system can talk to mine, can talk to 10 other people, and we can connect them in a platform that'll give us the ability to expand it further than what we intended. And so in order to do so, we're looking at, time frames dependent on, what technology is being built and how can we partner with others so that we're not, if you have a strong system and I have a strong system, why not partner and connect those so that it takes us less time to build something, and we're able to put it out to the public and consumers can have their hands on it. So we look at it like that. And so when you look at it that way, then the time frame is not like a decade. We're talking about something in the next 3 to 5 years potentially. But that's all dependent on who's creating what and how can we work together to create and build something that can be expansive.
Sounds interesting. Another question is, in times to come, will we be able to build natively in the metaverse like Minecraft or Fortnite? Like, can we create code for combining different pre-built elements into the new one?
Absolutely, and again, that's why I spoke on building platforms, because then those existing systems will be able to tie you in and be integrated into a platform that has the ability to read all of the data that is connected. For example, when you look at game design companies and game engines, you know, their platform is built on so many different systems. That's why you're able to plug in so many different things. Well, that's what we're looking to do with the metaverse, is to create something that has the ability to be able to tie in to something that's already been created and anything that's going to be created thereafter. It'll give everyone the better advantage to be able to use it without having to, you know, exclude anyone.
And how do you think Metaverse would change the way customers shop online right now?
Absolutely. So, you know, we all are familiar with e-commerce and WooCommerce, and so having, you know, a digital representation. For example, if you want to go shopping in Peru or Paris or New York when you're, you know, in Chicago, having a digital representation of, for example, a mall or a shopping center, and being able to actually your avatar is gives you the ability to try it on and then it's shipped to you. That ties in. Because the system is already created for e-commerce. Now imagine having that second layer of a digital representation of that product, being able to you're able to see it on your avatar or, you know, however, and having that shipped to you. Well, we're looking at building those systems as well, and we've already begun. You know, it helps that
And
most of these systems already been created. So it's just tying it in as APIs. You know, there are plugins that go inside of a metaverse.
how much time do you personally usually spend towards like making animated creation work daily?
Daily. Well, I don't sleep much. I actually sleep about 4 hours. Typically, on average work day, it's 16 to 18 hours a day that I'm working. So, I mean, this is what I create. So, having, for example, there's no exaggeration when I say that about 50 to 100,000 items have been created in the last 4 years, you know, by my hands alone, not including my team, which, you know, you can see there's a desk over there. There's a couple on the side of me. There's others in other rooms or whatever. So it's a lot that we work on. And even, for example, I come in sometimes, for example, at midnight, and I can notice that someone has remoted in and they're working on their workstation because they're at home and they can't sleep or something, and they sit there and they're working on something or creating something, you know, after hours. So I think a lot of hours are being spent towards creating something that can be used.
That is a lot. Yeah. How do metaverse architects get paid? Like, since cryptocurrencies are not a legal tender globally and their values keep fluctuating. So, how exactly does it happen?
Absolutely. So okay. So our business is divided into two components. It's the service side and then it's the IP. So on the service side, we're fulfilling orders for clients who's looking to create something or build something. For example, you know, a digital twin of a house or a pre-built structure. Well, we'll get commissioned by the client to create that. And so because of that, we're able to fund the next thing, which is tying those fundings inside of building out our own internal intellectual property or our R&D, which is our research and development for the metaverse. So there's a two-part system. And so because of that, you know, we have the service, which is we're offering or we're taking on, we're creating solutions around any issues or problems you see in your market. But then we're also utilizing our experience and we're able to take that and grow that within what we're building internally. Like I say, we're building not just, you know, the metaverse, but we're actually building a platform that can house the metaverse. And I think that is more appealing when it comes to say investors, because now you're talking about a system that everyone would be able to be included on and be able to use for growth. So when we look at it that way, there's multiple, and then on top of that, we help build NFTs. So with a marketplace, we're getting, blockchain and all of that. So it's a lot of different ways to be funded within the system.
Also, could you explain the term gamification when it comes to building and operating in the metaverse?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of our partners, Intrepid Data, one of the, I think it was 2014, I believe 2014 is when a lot of gamification came out of their system. And so they were able to really integrate with us on how to gamify or create gamification or game rules inside the real world environments, not just inside of digital, which is more relevant now. But I think then it was more so when practical or creating for clients, because we were solely at the time we were solely working as a service business. We didn't have our own property, and so because of that, it's very important now when you're talking about building these systems. We see it all the time. If you're talking about you're downloading, for example, a game, let's say someone like the Roblox. Well, they have Robux, which is basically their crypto, and they're able to tie in all of that loyalty and reward, because that's pretty much what gamification is. I give you a task, and you fulfill that task, and I reward you for it. Well, that's gamification. But let's go even simpler. Let's go to you're going to order food off a menu system, right? People don't think of it like that. Well, when you order food, don't you receive an item? You receive your food. Well, that's gamification rules. Not to mention, you also, when you pay, you receive a receipt, right? Well, that receipt technically is an NFT. All of these methods are being tied in for practical use cases. So it's very interesting.
For total beginners, metaverse seems very complex. So, what prerequisite skills would you suggest students should learn before getting into this?
I think honestly, see where your passions lie and where you want to see yourself. If you can't do this for more than 8 hours, if you can't create something for more than 8 hours or sit there for more than 8 hours and work it comfortably, I think that's not the place for you. Because I know people that work on colors all day. That's all they do is mix colors, but they love it. It's interesting to them. It's fun. If you can build that kind of rapport with whatever it is you're doing, I think that's where your passion lies, and that's where your energy should be placed. These type of things, building this, creating this, I can do this all day. I love it. It's fun. When I come to work, when people ask me, what is it that you do? I get to play for 8 hours. Typically, it's not 8 hours, it's 6 hours. But this is what I love doing. I'm passionate about creating, building, seeing a block or a cylinder become something that is unrecognizable to that base or its birth. So that is where I encourage any student, whenever you're starting, just start, create something. And by the way, uh, I'm also going to be giving out a free Epic Game uh, platform. The Epic Game for students is free. So you're able, anyone is watching, download Epic Games and Unreal Engine, and I'm going to have a link in the description for a free system, and you will also get access to all of it. So this is something I created that gives students the ability to walk around inside a metaverse, and they will have access to this for free. And the entire stage and what we're building today is going to be in here. And so this is actually just a framework, and I'm curious to see what people do with it and what you can build out of it.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So this will be free for download and for use.
So when you're building a metaverse or an environment, what are the core principles that you think of before getting started on?
But if you look behind us, I mean, that's a basic core breakdown of how we approach building any kind of product or project. You know, there's frameworks and there's animatics, there is storyboarding. We go through this whole list before we even get to the computer, typically. We're traditionalists here, so we'll go towards, pen and paper and then create posters. And then once we have a working or operational system in our bell ringers, we'll go to start to create these things and create items that will be used in our metaverses. And, this has helped us. Uh, One, it helps with accountability, it helps with timing, it helps with budgeting. It helps us all around because now we're not spinning our wheels in the wrong direction. We know we have a direction, a clear vision from start to finish. And that is necessary when you're working alone, and it's more so important when you're working with teams because again, cute animations is just one of our components, but we work with Intrepid Data, we work with DBW Management, who sources other talent and bring in other companies that we work with on the 3D uh, asset management level, and that's what we're turning into is basically metaverse architect asset managers. And so being able to collect all of that and make sure that the materials are sourced, it's licensed appropriately, and we're able to use it, and it is something that is of quality, then we're able to build on that and expand it into more of what we're doing, not just on the metaverse side, but also NFTs, because technically any of these systems that we're building that's unique to us can be considered as NFTs as well. So that's what we'll do.
And what can we look forward in the future from squared animations for creating in the world of metaverse?
Oh wow. Honestly, we have uh, a clear focus, and so I can't say too much to like direction right now, but we have a very clear focus of what we are doing and who we are partnering with to get there. And so our when you're looking at things like this, you know, we're building the metaverse from the asset side, from the content side. Other companies that we're working with will have the components to make it run. But the visuals, when it comes to, for example, creating just these items. Well, what happens is when we need, 100 unique drum sets, for example, for an e-commerce store, or dresses, or avatars, all of those components require function, and so that's what we're doing. We're working with companies internally, our partners, and our clients to create and to source their needs. So that's what we see ourselves as in the metaverse, is asset managers.
And do you think that in the near future of the Web 3.0, the metaverse architects would be able to like build stuff via using VR or AR, and hence simplify the process in some way?
Looking at where the hardware is going, absolutely. I think that's the goal, is to create simplified systems, uh, especially with the hardware, to be able to actually, you know, move around in the metaverse cohesively without having, these huge bulky items on. Uh, so yeah, when you look at, for example, the name escaped me, but there's a company that's creating uh, holographic contact lenses. You know, what happens when you're able to put them in and you're transported in the metaverse seamlessly? So Absolutely. I think, in the near future, we're going to see more hardware being created that'll give the ability for users to be in the metaverse seamlessly. So it's not an impede on lifestyle.
We have another question here. The metaverse can consist of limitless universes. Why is land in one universe considered valuable?
Well, if you look at crypto and how it's minded, right? Well, typically there's only a limited amount of resources. Well, when you're looking at the metaverse, the same rules apply because whomever is going to be the architects within that system is only going to build so much. So the scarcity of that is how much their service can hold. There's other factors in that as well, but when you look at it, it's the same thing. I mean, the land, our land, for example, in the real world, we can't create anymore. So it's going to be the same type of a deal, especially with one-off systems. And that's one of the reasons we're looking at solutions like, all right, creating platforms that can house more than what a single system can.
How would metaverse change the country's defense system? This has been a repetitive question that we sent out our forms for. So, what are your thoughts about it?
My thoughts about this, we have bell ringers every week, and we have to look at and research these type of factors. Well, in terms of defense system, I can't speak to that personally, but I can only speculate that within those systems that you will have that government component that will be able to police it. Because I find that the metaverse is going to be this amazing thing, but it's also going to be something that will eventually require some kind of sanction or policing when it comes to having many people in this system. So I don't know how that component will be used in terms of government or law, but what we're looking to do is build early into something that will give, you know, all a fair seat within it.
Oh, we have another new question. Do you think metaverse is making people just escape from the real world and live in a virtual one? And couldn't it be harmful in the long run for some people?
You know, honestly, I think when you look at the state of the world as is right now, something like the metaverse being able to escape is uh, necessary. It's going to be necessary, and those who are willing to will use it. Others will not, obviously, for whatever reason. But I think you know it's per the opinion of the beholder. And with, for example, this pandemic and having so many shutdowns, I think it's necessary because let's take education for example, right? Having a virtual space because now here, and I'm pretty sure most of the world are starting to shut back down when it comes to school. So there's a lot of e-learning and having the ability to be in your own privacy of your home, but inside a metaverse that you're able to converse with your friends and have this kind of limited contact would be a benefit to someone who is a natural extrovert. You know what I mean? Introverts, you're gonna be in your environment. You love being alone, and that's great. But what about those people who crave that human interaction but can't get it? So I think it's opinionated, and anything I say is opinionated, unless it's a factual thing. But I think in this instance, it plays well to those who are looking for that escape or looking for that interaction. But for those who just find it being easier alone, there are systems in here too for that. What happens, for example, we're building worlds that you have the ability, and it's your room, it's yours only. You have the ability to invite others in, or you can be there and interact with the AI systems and all of that and be great. So I think it's more so how users look to utilize their time within the metaverse.
Would it be possible to integrate the real world components, the minute ones? For example, a shelf has physical book. So we can put that in the metaverse and then link it to a virtual library. Is that possible?
Absolutely, absolutely. So one of the things that we're doing with our NFT system is having the ability to interact. So it's this interaction component, and so because of that, the foundation is built off of how we'll utilize the metaverse as well. And so because of that, you will have the ability to share digital data and digital content with other users. And that's where, again, I had previously spoke on having your own world, your room, for example. But that room can be shared by one or 100. It doesn't really matter. Or it can be left alone and be private. So you have the options.
What, in your opinion, are right now technical, the limitations that we have from achieving, metaverse all over us? What are the technical limitations that we are facing right now?
Honestly, I think the limitation is more so on what people are building and partnering. I think that's what it is because as an as a creator, I look for partnerships that are going to be beneficial to both parties. And so having someone who has more knowledge over here than I do, I think that's a benefit to both both of us and building something stronger. So I don't look at it as a limitation. I think it's a hurdle that we have to find creative solutions around. And that's what we look at. How can we find those solutions? And how can we find those partnerships that's going to be beneficial? Because that is what's going to separate who's building what. When you think of the top tier builders right now of the metaverse, you know what names come to mind. You're looking at the Microsoft, Facebook, but there's thousands of other smaller companies that have one thing that they do extremely well, and the benefit comes from being small. But then, how do you find those kindred spirits or those like-minded individuals that you can partner with, you can team with, and create something that can stand up to a bigger giant in these platforms or in these systems? I think that is what has to be the question. And how do we find those solutions? One of the things that we're looking at is, for example, Metaverse Architect DC is a company that will be funding the metaverse and having the ability to connect those smaller teams so that everyone gets a piece of the market share, but also have their uh, their influence in what is being created.
The questions seem to be done for now. We'll resume them if they come after your session is done.
Okay. Yeah. So how much time do I have?
You have around 15-20 minutes.
20 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So right now, all I'm doing is I'm building out basic shapes and basic components, and eventually we get to this based off of what I was just creating. And again, really detailed things that have the ability to animate and to move and interact. But then when you get past that component, then we build out the fourth stage with lighting, guitars. And again, for example, let's say this is my component that I'm building, or Cute Animations is building. But we teamed up with another company that has to create the stage component or the lighting. We'll place all of these into a system that will be able to run it. And like before, you saw over here where we have everything created out. And I'm able to take that and then tie in third person characters or avatars, for example, in any style, any range. But then, you know, there's extra components within this engine to make things work. Lighting, for example, and creating the back end systems that will give me the ability to not fall off the edge, for example. So these are game systems, by the way. And again, this is Epic Games and Unreal Engine, and this will be available for free for all of these students or anyone who wants to download it and use this. So, you know, so what I'll do typically is once we have something that is drawn out, is take all of these contents, make sure they're UV mapped, make sure everything is in its place, export it out of here, and I'm using Maya, by the way, but then take that into Unreal.
Do you think that machine learning technology would be able to achieve complete AI thinking with the metaverse? Is that possible?
You know what? I think absolutely there is a place for it, but the human component at this moment is still necessary as well. So I think that it's a combination, and having machine learning gives you ability to run within the system, but will it be able to build at the rate right now that we're looking to build? That's a matter of opinion, but I don't believe so. I think there's always going to be require a human touch with this. You know,
How do you predict which meta space to invest into? Like, there are so many coming up. There's Meta, Somnium Space, Microsoft, Sandbox. How do you predict which one would you want to invest in?
well, I can't say a lot, but we're in talks with a lot of these companies, and so having that dialogue to see what they're looking to create and how we're looking to grow and what we're looking to build is usually, a matter of who needs what can we achieve with them, what they're looking to achieve, the goals that are being set. And so that is just, timing, I think.
What is the price range of having a world built in metaverse? And how long does it take, roughly?
Typically, it all depends. Let's say, for example, I built all of Chicago recently for the metaverse, very detailed down to the block. And so we're still building out more complex within those systems. And we're talking about an engagement that takes anywhere between 3 months to a year to create all of that, to be that detailed. And we're talking about based off of map data, being able to build all of the trees, all of, and then not just building it, but what happens because A digital twin is fine, but what happens when you're talking about adding particle effect? We're adding game engine backend information so that when you get to a certain component, things interactive. When you get to a door or you get to a store and you go into that system. So there's a lot of things to consider when you're talking about building out these things. And it could take you, I mean, when I created the drum set initially, it took about 8 hours. That's just a drum set. Now you're talking about building out buildings and cars and all of the lighting systems. We're talking about a lot of assets that need to be created, and that's just off of a digital twin perspective. But then you're talking about like this abstract or fantasy versions of things, or the reflective versions, because we've done that as well, where we take actual digital twins of physical spaces and asked or tasked with creating this fantastical world out of it. Well, that time frame can range between 1 month and 5, 6. It all depends on what has whatever is on that line item or that sheet to be created or completed. So I mean, it more so depends on the understanding of the project. So with students, I encourage them to take a lot of notes, work with whomever it is. If, for example, if you're working with clients, then you want to make sure that you have a clear understanding of their vision and make sure that they are directors within this system, because there's nothing, to me, in my opinion, there's nothing more frustrating than a person saying, "Well, you're the designer, just create." No, because my vision is going to look different from yours, right? So I can't just go and create my vision and then it doesn't. What happens when it doesn't correlate with yours? So that'll become an issue it'll frustrate you, and it'll frustrate the client, and it'll create mistrust within them to think that, okay, well, you're not as knowledgeable as you say you are. Well, the problem is that we have to manage expectations, and if you manage them appropriately and educate, because I tell my clients all the time, I'm a designer who love to entertain, but I also love to educate what's possible, educate what I can do, and educate you on your role within this, because again, you're going to have those clients that's like, well, I want you to build me a tree. No, let's go with build me a house. Okay, what would you like in the house? I don't know, you're the designer, design it. Well, yeah, I need your input. I mean, are we talking about a one story? This is single family? Is this multiple unit? Then they're like, oh, well, I didn't even consider that. Absolutely. Well, I need your opinion. What kind of colors are we looking at? Are we talking about brick? Are we talking about siding? When you start to manage those expectations and give them homework, then they become architect of their own projects. And so when that happens, now you have a funner time creating these things, because you took a lot of the anxiety out of creating or working with clients.
Would designing in the metaverse help boost 3D printed structures in the real world?
I think there is a correlation between the two. I mean, it's always work hand in hand. And so I've created, for example, I've worked with architects and clients that have created structures based off of nothing. What I mean is there's no building, there's no representation, and we have to come up with what it looks like, how it's going to be created based off the square footage, what their fantasy or their ideals are, and we have to come up with a plan, blueprint, map it out, create a digital copy of it, take that digital copy into a CAD data that gives you all of the elevation and all of these methods, but then you have a digital space that will be represented as a physical space, and vice versa. I've given all of this CAD data and said, okay, well, we need to create additions or we want to modify them. So it all depends on where your directions lie and how comfortable you are with working with certain clients. Once I had an instructor that told me, like, well, it's going to get to a place where you're going to have so many jobs that you're going to turn it down, And as an ambitious student, I'm like, no, I would never turn them down. But then after years of working with clients and understanding like where we our strengths lie, then I understood where he was going because he was in the industry. It wasn't like he was just an instructor, but he was an artist that was working on big budget films, and so he understood where, based off of conversation that we had, where I wanted to go in my career. And so for him to tell me that, he was trying to manage my expectations of the market as well, and say, well, listen, I get where you're, based off of what you told me, the information you told me, here's what you need to know. And so I appreciate it. And so that's why I tell my students, manage your expectations and have this understanding that the client, you're working with them, not for them. I tell my clients all the time, I don't work for you because if I work for you, I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. But I'm a creative, so I'm going to work with you so I can offer you creative solutions, so we can marry the two, your idea on top of what's practical based off of best practices. Does that I hope that makes any sense for the student that asked the questions.
Mm. Yeah, we seem to be running out of time, so and the questions have also ended. Would you like to help us with a few final words?
Absolutely. I think if anything, I would say, based on your passion, drive it home. Create as much as possible because that content is going to be valuable to someone. Uh, if you are an architect or you like CAD drawings, that is going to be valuable. If you are a sound person, that's going to be valuable. All of these skill sets will be valuable in the metaverse because if you look at how the marketplace is set up inside of our real world, well, we're digitally copying our real world. So those skill sets are going to prove double valuable, not just in a practical sense, but in a digital sense. So keep creating, find your passion, and you know enjoy what you're doing. Yeah,
Thank you so much, Quitman. It was a pleasure listening to you.
it was the same. I
And
think
thank you all of you for being such a wonderful and understanding audience. I hope you all are filled with high spirits now and are looking forward towards developing your own metaverse. So here once again, I thank you all and have a very good night.
thank you.